Good morning. I'm Norma with the good news for January the 26th. Well, I'm guilty of often just skimming over these familiar stories, but I'd like to read the entire account of Jesus feeding the 5,000 from John chapter 6. And as I read, see if there's anything new that pops up for you. Now, after this, Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs that he was doing for the sick. Now Jesus went up the mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near. When he looked up and saw a large crowd coming towards him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. And Philip answered him, 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. And one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many people?" And Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in the place, so they sat down, about 5,000 in all. And when Jesus took the loaves and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated, so also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they were satisfied, he told his disciples, "Gather up the fragments left over, so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. And when the people saw the sign that he had done, they began to say, "This is indeed the prophet who is come into the world." But when Jesus realized that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. Now this story is found in all the Gospels, but only John adds that small detail of a little boy with his lunch. And this is how I remember the story told in Sunday school. Now, if we know anything about young boys, they are always hungry. It took the simple faith of a child to hand over his lunch to the disciples, never questioning how his meager pieces of bread and fish could feed so many people. And he never doubted that he too would have his fill. But too often we're more like Philip, grumbling. 6 months' wages still wouldn't buy enough bread to give everyone even a little bit. Or Andrew, who took the boys' lunch and looked around at the crowd and said, "This won't go very far." We have seen and experienced God at work, and yet still question him in difficult situations, doubting that our prayers will make any difference. Take a look around at the people sitting on the hillside, listening to Jesus. They're just ordinary folk like you and me. Undoubtedly, crowds followed Jesus because they heard the stories of his healing the sick, giving sight to the blind, maybe making the lame walk, or even casting out demons. They came searching for healing. Some probably were followers who were eager to hear Jesus teach. And no doubt there were some who just came because they were merely curious, unaware of their own need. Whatever their reason for coming, everyone left satisfied. Now, unlike Jesus' first miracles, where only a handful of people knew what he had done, here we have 5,000 witnesses. Just imagine how quickly the good news spread. We see in this story evidence of God incarnate in Jesus. Yes, he is familiar with our frailty, but he has also experienced what it is like to be tired, thirsty, or hungry. He looks around at the crowd who have been sitting all day and knows that they will soon be grumbling for something to eat. Now, Jesus didn't simply come to experience humanity in all its weakness and temptations, but to show us how to be human, how we should respond to those who are lonely or afraid, to care for the sick, for those in need. But Jesus tells his disciples that I'm the way to know the Father. And again, it is Philip who asked Jesus to show us the Father so we may be satisfied. Sadly, Jesus responds, "Have I been with you all this time, and you still do not know me. Do we know that God is good? His love is steadfast, and his mercy and compassion unending. Now, I recently watched a 2023 movie called The Miracle Club. It's set in Ireland in the late 60s. A group of women travel to Lourdes looking for healing, but they leave disappointed. See, not one of them has been cured. One of the women tells the others that miracles happen while we are waiting for a miracle. Well, this line struck me. See, we become so fixated on what we want God to do for us that we miss God's transformative power. This is the real miracle. Jesus saw people hungry, in need of food, and immediately responds. We don't have to look beyond our front door to see pain and suffering. Our hearts long to respond, but too often we become overwhelmed by the enormity of the need, and so we do nothing. Jesus demonstrates not just the call to action, but how he engages his disciples and the hungry to all come together. We offer what little we are able, and then leave it up to God to multiply our small offering. God's blessings are abundant, and we come away from the table satisfied with enough spilling over to feed others in need. May each of us be willing to be a part of bringing God's kingdom here on earth. Well, God bless, and I'll see you in a few weeks. Bye-bye.